regions, and our focus here was mostly on the northwest and the southwest regions of Cameroon, where we have a crisis. And we had 5 indicator categories, which included school inclusions, quality of education, school governance and management, security and safety. And these indicators were measured over a period of 6 months, and incentives were given based on performance. And thanks to this PBF in the crisis regions, we realized that 30% of poor and vulnerable children were able to benefit from this, and 30% of teachers' bonuses came from this program. Then we were able to touch 24 schools, 4 sub-inspectorates of basic education, and more than 200 teachers, over 10,000 kids in these 24 schools. Oh, sorry. Then we were also able to do a project on menstrual hygiene management, which also helped to close the education equity gap. And our focus was on 3 priority regions. Again, the northwest, the far north, and the east. And we worked with 15 schools, 5 from each region. And we had a target population of 10,000 female learners of menstruation age. And this was between the ages, the learners were between the ages of 10 to 20 years. And we're able to provide them with dignity kits, which was made up of a number of items like sanitary towels, toilet soaps, underwears, combs, detergents inside a backpack. So we also have another approach known as evidence to read day, which has helped us a lot to get research evidence to non-literate communities. With this approach, we bring scientists together to work with traditional storytellers to develop evidence stories. And these storytelling events are organized, especially in rural communities, so that they can understand the literature behind the evidence. And this helps them to make evidence-informed choices and to promote evidence uptake by communities. So presently, we are using it to prevent and mitigate sexual and gender-based violence in a rural community in Cameroon. So we also have a tool that we use to evaluate evidence use within policies, and this is known as the evidence barometer. And this evidence barometer it helps to score policies, and it makes recommendations for evidence uptake in policies. So actually, this evidence barometer can be used both at central and decentralized levels by policymakers and also development agencies. And it measures 10 evidence points, which includes stakeholders engagement, evidence search and use, peer review. It also addresses a conflict of interest, amongst other things. So for each of these recommendations, a maximum score of 27 points is possible. And based on the points, we're able to make recommendations for evidence uptake in policies. Then at eBASE too, we use a lot of evidence which is accurate, is actionable, is accessible, and is also appropriate. So eBASE facilitates access to evidence of what works through teacher fellowships, through stakeholder sessions, through pedagogy clinics too. So eBASE also has the capacity to introduce teachers and policymakers for practice and decision making. And now we already collaborate with ministries like the Ministry of Basic Education and the Ministry of Secondary Education to improve evidence uptake, and also with academia in Cameroon to improve the quality of research. And then eBASE has a lot of experience working with global partners like OIF, like Education Endowment Foundation in the UK, like Grand Challenges Canada, amongst others. So at eBASE, we have our colors, and each color represents something. Shamrock green stands for health, lavender is for local governance, baby blue stands for education and wash, coffee brown is for arts, but our lead colors are shamrock and lavender. So eBASE Africa has received a number of awards in the past 4 years or so, and this includes Cochrane, the Aubrey Sheham Award for the 30 under 30 series in 2019. Joanna Briggs Institute, eBASE has actually had 3 awards from the Joanna Briggs Institute, and this was in 2017, 2018, and 2020. African Evidence Network, 3 awards in 2018, 2019, and 2021. Revisoft from 2019 to 2021. And EEF, which we attained Triple Jump Award 2020 to 2021. The World Bank 2016 and 2021. IDRC, Bistro, French Embassy, Francophonie, OIF, and Grand Challenges Canada, Storytelling for SGP 2022. And our contacts, we have a board, and our contact, that's the board president, is Dr. Mavis Tebit, and the team lead is Dr. Patrick Okwen. That's our email address, our phone numbers, and if you want to know more about eBASE, you can visit their website at www.ebaseafrica.org, and this is our Twitter handle at eBASE_Africa at Okwen. So these are some of the logos of our partners, the partners that we're working with. Education Endowment Foundation, La Francophonie, World Bank, Campbell, Grand Challenges, IDRC. Yeah. So
thank you very much, Awe, for that. Thank you very much, Awe, for that very interesting presentation. Thank you very much, Awe, for that very interesting presentation. I know it wasn't easy to present eBASE on with such limited time, considering work that has been done. I am sure everybody has had a proper understanding of what eBASE is and the work we are doing. And I will be happy to take some quick give some answer to questions later. So without further ado, I will go to the next presentation, which will be on the eBASE Teaching and Learning Toolkit. So I'll be telling you what the eBASE Teaching and Learning Toolkit is and how it came about. I hope everyone is able to see my screen. Please confirm if you can see my screen.
yeah, we can see a screen, Irobe.
We can see your screen.
Thank you. So we'll be looking at the eBASE Teaching and Learning Toolkit, but before diving into the eBASE Teaching and Learning Toolkit, we are going to look at education infographics, and that's just looking at key education indicators in Cameroon right now. Then we will tell you what the eBASE Teaching and Learning Toolkit is. We'll take a deep dive into the toolkit, then we will talk about the future of the toolkit. So talking about education in Cameroon, the government of Cameroon has done a lot of progress and a lot of effort in improving access to education. but quality of education remains poor. Attainment in Cameroon, measured in terms of literacy and numeracy, remain very poor, with 1 out of 4 pupil able to read, able to count, and only 2 out of 4 able to read. So despite a lot of effort that has been done in bringing these students to school, there is still a lot that has to be done to improve on teaching and learning and to actually help keep these students in schools. The challenges are numerous, and we believe an approach like having a tool or having a toolbox with a set of interventions that can actually help teachers, help policymakers, help schools administration to actually improve on their work could be very helpful in our setting. So that's actually what gave rise to the need for a teaching and learning toolkit. So the eBASE Teaching and Learning Toolkit is actually an up-to-date overview of educational research. So it's like a summary of thousands and thousands of studies that have been put together in specific topics that we call strands. And in the eBASE Teaching and Learning Toolkit, we actually have 29 of these strands. So look at strands like sets of interventions that can be implemented in a school milieu or in a learning environment. So this research, because if they just stay in libraries or stay online or in research terms, are very difficult for teachers or for other educational stakeholders to really interpret them and act on them. We summarize them and brought them in plain language on an online platform open to everybody, free access, and French and English for people to be able to access them and act on them. So the toolkit gives the best bet based on what has worked and what has not worked. And it's a good starting point for you to bring about change. For example, if you need to find an intervention that can improve learning in your environment or in your school, the toolkit is a good starting point, because you can look at what has been done already, you can look at what has worked, you can look at what has not worked, and you can build on that for your future intervention or for what you want to do in future. So in order to get into the eBASE Teaching and Learning Toolkit, I will already explain it. You just need to type ebaselearning.org, www.ebaselearning.org, and you come on a page like this. So when you're on a page like this, you have the About Us, which will tell you basically what Awe told you about us and who we are. And you are going to have the Teaching and Learning Toolkit button. So you click on the Teaching and Learning Toolkit button, and it's going to take you to the toolkit itself. So it's going to bring you to this page that you are seeing on your screen, which is the Teaching and Learning Toolkit page. So basically, you have the page is separated into two. Basically, you have this the header, and on the next slide, you are going to see the footer. So on this header, there are 3 things that you need to look at and that are actually very important. The first thing is the cost of implementation. The second thing is the strength of the evidence. And the third thing is the impact in months. As I was explaining, the Teaching and Learning Toolkit has a series of strands, and all of these strands are categorized within, explained by these three aspects. So when you have a strand, you need to know what is the cost of that particular strand, what is the evidence behind that particular strand, and what is the impact in months that particular strand. The cost of the evidence is how much it's going to cost you if you want to try something like that. For example, a strand that we have is homework. And if you want to try an intervention like homework, how much will it cost? And generally, it's estimated in calories, and you have between 1 to 5 calories. The strength of the evidence is estimated in padlocks, and you have also between 1 to 5 padlocks. So the higher the number of padlocks, the higher the amount. The higher the amount. Then you have the month impact. For the month impact, it actually shows you the difference, the difference that will exist within a child that will follow this intervention and a child that has not followed this intervention. For example, if you have a month impact of 2 months, it tells you that a child that went through one particular intervention is 2 months ahead of a child that has not gone through that particular intervention. So this on this header, you can choose, for example, to say you need you can specify you need an intervention with an implementation cost of maybe 1 calorie. You need to bring that down. That means you need an intervention that is actually cheap. Or you can say you need an intervention with a strength of evidence of about 3 padlocks. So you can bring the number of padlock like to the middle in order to pick the strands that you want within the categories that you want. So these are actually the strands that you can find on the toolkit. You can see one of them as participation, aspiration, intervention, behavior intervention, and you can see that all of them are categorized. You can see, for example, that for arts participation, the cost is relatively low. It's just 2 calories. The strength of the evidence is the evidence is at least trustworthy. You have up to 3 padlock, and any child that goes through this particular intervention has 3 months of additional benefit. That's 3 months advance as compared to a child that did not go through this particular intervention. So within this presentation, my colleague Gloria will be talking about the feedback strand, which has a very high months of impact, and you actually understand what is behind these numbers. So when you click on each of the strand, for example, let's say you click on a particular strand, this is what will appear. So you are going to see what the strand is. So we start by a definition of the strand, what the strand is. You are going to be presented with key results. You are going to be presented with the different effectiveness approaches. You are going to have a beyond the average, where they're going to tell you that, okay, these are the average, what is above those average, behind those average, what is hidden behind. So that will be uncovered. You are going to look at how to apply this particular approach and many more. So when you click on the strand, you have this page. The first one is what is it? For example, in feedback, the first line is going to be what is feedback. Then it's going to you are going to have the key results. So you'll be navigating from top to bottom, and you will have the key results. And this section is actually going to present you with different results that we have. Then the next section is going to present to you the efficacy of the approach. And it's going to tell you, for example, that, okay, this approach, this is the effectiveness of this particular approach, and you'll be reading at that of feedback, for example, in this case, of homework in another scenario. Then after, you are going to dive into behind the average. For example, let me tell you that the average is 7 months, but or is 6 months. Is 6 months, you have an average of 6 months benefit, but this maybe it's for primary school is better than in secondary schools. It's going to tell you, for example, that if you want this effect depends may reduce because of these or may increase because of this. So in this section, they are going to uncover hidden information behind these averages. The next section will be telling you, for example, the different approaches that you can use within these within the particular strand that you've chosen. For example, for feedback, you have the oral feedback and the written feedback. And when you go further down, it's going to tell you how you can implement these intervention in schools. Then the final part will be telling you how reliable this strand is based on research that was conducted. So this is going to be a summary of what has been done. So within that particular strand, you have a technical file where you can actually have access to all research evidence that was conducted, and that helped us in organizing and generating all the information that you are reading in plain language. So you have the technical appendix that you can follow if you want more technicalities. But basically, what you have to do as a teacher or as a policymaker or as a school proprietor or school administration staff is just to get into these plain language summary, read them, understand them, dissect them. And if you need more understanding, then you can go into the technical file and get into the technicalities. And we will always be available to provide any additional information you may need. So there are some advantages and disadvantages of using this toolkit. The first advantage is that there is a large amount of evidence that's being made as accessible to you. So by just reading one plain language summary or by just going through one particular strand on our topic, it's thousands of research that has been synthesized for you to read. The second thing is that it followed a very neutral and transparent approach in coming about this, in synthesizing this evidence, and you can follow this approach, which is replicable, and you have the same results that we have. So it shows how trustworthy this evidence or this toolkit is. It also allows you to compare different approach, or to compare. For example, you will know that in our setting, for example, feedback as compared to maybe behavior intervention, which is brings more impact, and which, for example, is cost more than the other. So we also had a strong emphasis on rigor, and the toolkit is a live resource, so we are updating the toolkit. We toolkit constantly. So every time there's new research evidence that surfaces, this is analyzed and added in our toolkit. So some of the downside is that, for example, the month's progress is an average of many studies. So when you do an average of many studies, at times there are some particularities of these studies that can be, there are some variations in outcomes that you lose, or that cannot be felt. It's not a clear directive of what you should do exactly for change to come, but it's a starting point. For example, you know that if you want to implement feedback in school, this is how you should do it, and this is the potential. This is potentially the benefit that it can bring to your school, but it does not tell you exactly what you should do above that particular. So the toolkit also is based on research, and its strength is based on the quality of that research. So if, for example, the meta-analysis that was used for that particular research is not very good, the toolkit would not equally, the results in the toolkit will not equally be very good. That's why the padlocks on the strength of the evidence are very important. Because, for example, you can say that a study that a strand that will have 4 or 5 padlock have very good and reliable studies, and that the results are extremely trustworthy. So that's it about the toolkit. So this is a small methodology of how the toolkit came about. So the toolkit, what we did first of all is that we did a systematic review and meta-analysis of the intervention. This was not actually done by us. This was done by the Educational Endowment Foundation, which developed the first teaching and learning, first ever teaching and learning toolkit. And the eBASE teaching and learning toolkit is just an adaptation of that toolkit, a contextualization of that particular toolkit. So there's systematic review and meta-analysis with predefined search criteria. So research was, studies were searched, synthesized, and synthesized and organized into strands. And after this was done, we had to do some qualitative studies to actually understand what preferences, stakeholders' preferences in sub-Saharan Africa with these studies. We also had to conduct studies in sub-Saharan Africa to merge with these stakeholder preferences. And all those information, we contrasted all those information with what we had on global scene to generate what we have on our toolkit. So this slide is to show you quickly how we have the month's impact. For example, you are seeing that on your right, you can see the different months impact, and you can see that it corresponds to effect size. Effect sizes are just like the mean differences of main interventions. So when these effect sizes are aggregated, they are converted into months of impact. A quick one you can see, for example, is that with an effect size between 0.1 and 0.0, negative 0.01 and 0.1, you have a very low effect size of 0, and the amount of months is 0. So you can see that the more the effect size increases, the more the month's impact will equally increase. For the security of the evidence is based on the type of study that we based ourselves on, that we synthesize in generating evidence in that particular strand. So studies that are based on rigorous meta-analysis that they themselves were based on randomized control trial are rated as high. So the more we have randomized control trial and systematic reviews and meta-analysis, the more padlock we have, and the less we have, the less padlock we have. Yes. So what about the future of the toolkit? Now that we have this toolkit and that is available, what we intend to do is continuously updating this toolkit. Because evidence comes every day, because research is being conducted every day, new evidence will be coming, and we'll be adding this in our toolkit. We'll continue with evidence mobilization, bringing this toolkit into the classroom by talking to teachers, having webinar sessions like this, talking to teachers, talking to them about the toolkit, having them look at the toolkit, work with it, and eventually using it in their daily practices. Also want to partner with governments to use this approach, or to use this toolkit in teachers training institution, and also this can help in decision making. So we're also planning to translate this. The toolkit is now in French and in English. We're also planning to translate it to Spanish, to have it, and Portuguese, so that we can cover all countries of the sub-Saharan African region. So that is it for my presentation. I hope you've had a clear understanding of what the toolkit is. If not, I'll be happy to take some questions after this. So that being said, I think we'll dive in the most important part of this presentation, which will be the feedback strand, which will be presented by my colleague Gloria.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar session on feedback. I am Gloria Aka, a researcher at eBASE Africa. So for today's presentation, we're going to be looking at an introduction, definition and purpose of feedback, security, cost and impact of feedback, and what are some of the evidence gap map. And we shall be presenting some summary findings on feedback in sub-Saharan Africa, evidence implementation of feedback in the Lake Chad Basin, and what to consider when implementing feedback in our context. And furthermore, we shall have some conclusions. So given the recent interest and global commitment in educational attainment and quality education for all, which is part of the Sustainable Development Goal number 4, improving learning outcomes has become more critical, and it is important to implement focused strategies that works best, informed by best available evidence in improving learners' outcome. And this is particularly in literacy and numeracy. So focus is tilted towards literacy and numeracy due to the fact that findings indicate how learners still feel uncomfortable or anxious with these components, and most especially within the context of limited resource settings like sub-Saharan African countries, particularly in Central Africa. And most Central African countries are still in ignorance of what interventions work best in improving learning outcomes and under what circumstances remain a major impediment to rational decision making. And the truth is that, short of this, many governments in most developing countries may continue spending scarce resources and inputs on what will not directly contribute to learners' outcome. And globally, evidence feedback is one of the interventions that can contribute to learners' progress, thereby improving learning outcomes. And due to this, much consideration has been recently given to the methods by which effective feedback should be delivered in improving learning outcomes. So now the question is, what is feedback? So in 2007, Timperley and Haiti defined feedback as information given by an agent. So this agent could be a teacher, it could be a parent, it could be a book, it could be a peer or an experience regarding aspects of a learner's performance or understanding. So looking at the security, cost and impact, so the security of evidence on feedback is high with relatively moderate cost of implementation and high impact in improving learning outcomes. So however, the cost of implementation in sub-Saharan African countries could increase if decisions to mitigate some of the challenges providing effective feedback, such as reducing the class size or recruiting of teaching assistants to manage the large class sizes, or allocating extra teaching time for teachers to attend and address the concerns of learners, and provision of some teaching and learning materials to pupils and learners or teachers as well. So this is the visuals of the feedback strand on the toolkit. That's the eBASE Teaching and Learning Toolkit, indicating how feedback has very high impact for moderate costs based on extensive evidence. So the truth is, feedback well done or delivered plays a bigger role or a very important role in supporting pupils' progress, improving their learning and addressing misunderstandings, and thereby closing the gap between where a pupil is and where the teacher actually wants them to be. But however, according to EAF, that's the Education Endowment Foundation, they highlight that not all feedback demonstrate positive effects, as poor or bad feedback can even harm or derail progress. Neither is large amount of time for providing pupils with feedback imperative to be productive. So the question now is, why is the feedback strand important in improving learning outcomes? Firstly, it reduces the discrepancies between current understanding and what is aimed to be understood. That's based on curriculum learning goals. And secondly, it helps learners build new knowledge. And due to the fact that it's a global concept proven to transform teaching, guide learning, and improving learning outcomes, it is very important to implement the feedback strand in our setting. That's particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, where studies on feedback implementations are limited. And it also brings about a change in pedagogic culture. It could be workplace culture or culture adapted by teachers towards learners in school. And this feedback could be verbal or written with various dimensions, that's either focusing on tasks or learning strategies, such as building on students' prior knowledge and focusing on the tasks as well. So timely and informative feedback helps learners to recognize and correct knowledge, that's knowledge gaps and understandings and misunderstandings. So what are the evidence gap map behind evidence implementation of feedback? So there has been limited research on impact of feedback interventions on learning outcomes in sub-Saharan Africa. So unfortunately, most of the available evidence on feedback practices in these regions dominate from Southern Africa. That's precisely South Africa, where feedback intervention have captured teachers' expectations from written feedback and teachers' experiences with communal feedback in some rural communities in South Africa. And to the best of our knowledge, that's between 1990 to 2015, there were limited high-quality studies or impact evaluation on diagnostic feedback carried out in sub-Saharan Africa. And unfortunately, West Africa and Central Africa are limited to such high-quality studies. And however, there are a couple of quantitative and qualitative studies on existing feedback practices and its impact on learning outcome in sub-Saharan Africa. And with these qualitative and quantitative studies available, this is relevant for providing orientations to teachers on how to effectively implement feedback, or what type of feedback mechanism have been proven useful within the different contexts in sub-Saharan Africa. So improving learning outcomes cannot be separated from the role, presence, and impact of teachers. And this is because impacts are highest when feedback is delivered by teachers. And the region has been dominated by persistent poor teaching practices, such as chalk and talk, teacher-centered pedagogy which calls for a shift towards a learner-centered pedagogy. So this was done by UNESCO in 2004. And we shall be looking at some summary research finding on feedback in sub-Saharan Africa. So a study on the formative assessment professional development program, which was implemented in South Africa as a randomized control trial, demonstrated that when teachers provide learners with motivational comments, that's to encourage them on how to improve on their work, more teachers in the fee-paying schools expected learners to be happy why more teachers in the non-fee paying schools expected learners to really improve on their work or build prior knowledge. And similarly, in 2019, WEA revealed that accounting teachers in Royal South African communities affirmed the need for learners' responses because it was an indication that the learners either misinterpreted or misunderstood the question. So in addition to other studies have highlighted the challenges to implementing proper feedback in sub-Saharan Africa. And according to Gueya in 2019 still, he revealed how most accounting teachers in some rural South African communities indicated that the time allocated to teach accounting and attend the learners' challenges was inadequate, and extra lessons could not be offered or given after schools because learners had to walk very long distances back home. So more so, in 2016, Labate and Salsano indicated how the African context characterized by large class sizes, coupled with numbers and time constraint, impeded the implementation of learner-centered and corrective learning pedagogies. So as such, individual feedback sessions with learners in difficulties are scarce. Likewise, Nelo and said, based on their findings, explain how the process of changing teaching styles in Africa is hampered by inadequate teacher preparation, support, large class sizes, and lack of resources, and some poor pedagogic practices or cultures. So other findings in 2019 provides details about some teachers in South Africa who have completed assessment for learning trainings, experienced difficulties integrating formative assessment and their daily practices towards learners. And this is because the emphasis on assessment, they emphasize on assessment rather than forming a pedagogy, which is the focus of learning to learners. So regarding evidence implementation, so eBASE Africa is making contributions to promoting evidence-based practices regarding providing effective feedback in schools that's across Cameroon, Chad, and Niger. Cameroon, Chad, Niger, and Nigeria, that's the Lake Chad Basin. And this intervention is being rolled out after a working sessions with ministries of education that's in Chad, in Cameroon, in Niger, and the Nasarawa state in Nigeria, where there was a need for systematic quality improvement in schools. Feedback, amongst other interventions, was identified as a priority during stakeholders consultations, and the body of evidence supporting pedagogic feedback in sub-Saharan Africa or in the Lake Chad Basin is limited. So what are some of the strategies that could guide us, or what to consider when implementing feedback in our settings? So some of the strategies are, first, we understand that providing effective feedback is challenging, and effective feedback tends to be specific and accurate. It could be accurate and clear. That is, it's always good because you rather correct the student and give comments rather than just correct and leave it. So communicate with pupils, teachers, and parents about practices and expectations that relate to feedback policies. And another strategy is assessing pupils' understanding to know what needs to be improved. That's also building on learners' prior knowledge. So another strategy is providing opportunities for pupils to act upon the feedback after it has been given and evaluating how effective the feedback has been. And lastly, consider the opportunity, that's the opportunity and cost associated with different feedback mechanisms in various settings or in the sub-Saharan African setting. So with this, evidence used on feedback is quite limited in sub-Saharan Africa, most especially within the Central African system. And with the global evidence of positive learning outcomes due to effective feedback, it is important, or it will be important, to carry out further research in sub-Saharan Africa on feedback practices to fully ascertain its impact on learning within this context. So this eventually calls for more robust studies to be carried out in sub-Saharan Africa, particularly in the Chad Basin, which has limited studies or feedback implementation. So with this, I want to thank you all for listening, and we look forward to answering some of your interesting questions.
Thank you very much, Gloria, for that brilliant presentation. So we've come to the end of our presentations, and we'll be happy to answer some of the questions if you have any. So if you have any question, please just unmute yourself and ask your question. You can also type your question in the chat box, and we'll read them here and give an answer, provide an answer to them. So thank you. The floor is yours. Okay. So we have a question on the chat from Shanice. So Shanice, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question? So Shanice is saying, so generally, the problem faced in low-income countries are low access and retention of pupils in school, poor quality of education, corruption, and poor safety and security. But so far, the only issue which is currently being addressed is quality of education. So what is being done about the other aspect? Thank you very much, Shanice, for this very interesting question. Your question is timely because we should not only focus on improving quality of education without looking at issues such as other aspects such as retention, for example, or corruption. So where you are not correct is that the toolkit does not focus only on intervention that are aimed towards pedagogy. The toolkit also has intervention that are geared towards retention. For example, a strand like behavioral intervention in school actually tells you things you can do to manage violent behavior or unwanted behaviors in school. And that can help us move away from poor practices like sending students away or beating students or corporal punishment in school. And these can, in due time, improve on retention and reduce school dropouts. So yes, and the toolkit is, as I was saying, the toolkit is a live project. We continue working on it. We continue improving it, and we continue building on much more interventions that would improve access. Another strand in the toolkit that may be very interesting, since you also talked about retention, for example, and that can help in security. It's built environment. So we see how built environment improve on attendance, and how a built environment intervention can be rolled out in the school. So it's not just about pedagogy and quality of education, but it's about addressing all these issues that influence or impact education in Cameroon and in sub-Saharan Africa as a whole. I hope I gave an answer to that question. I'll be happy to provide more insight if you have any follow-up questions. Thank you again for that question, Shanice. We'll be happy to have any other question. Please just feel free to unmute yourself. We'll be happy to have questions or comments.
Hello, this is Nine. Can I go ahead and ask my question?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. So most of the strands you have presented have cost tied to it. So I wanted to find out, does it mean that teachers need money to be able to implement these strands? If that be the case, how is the program going to help teachers to be able to have the money to implement it? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nine, for that very interesting question. So the cost we are talking about is everything that will be needed, like everything that will be needed for that particular intervention to happen. For example, an intervention like feedback may need some teachers' professional development. Maybe we need to train teachers for them to understand how to provide feedback, for them to understand the best approaches for them to provide feedback, and training them requires a cost. So if a teacher wants to implement feedback, the teacher needs to understand what is feedback and how this should be done. So basically, for that particular strand, the teacher will not need money. The teacher just needs to understand how it is done and go ahead and do it. But for some other strands, there may be some materials that the teacher may need. For example, a strand like homework. For example, this may entail that the students should have books to be able to do their homeworks in school, or other things that may influence cost. So cost is not about how much money the teacher will spend. The cost that we are having here is about everything that any cost section or any financial, anything that deals with finances and that will influence that particular intervention. So it's holistic. It's not only about a teacher or a student. It's anything that will be spent, and that is factored within that cost. Like what is needed, that's factored in that cost. I hope that was clear. I will also invite Away and Gloria, if they want to add anything, can come in and chip in something. That is fine. We'll be happy to have some more questions or comments.
Okay, thank you, Rigobert. Please, just to follow up, this means that a teacher cannot just go to the eBASE site, access the toolkit, and go ahead to implement it. They must work in collaboration with eBASE to be able to implement it properly. Is that what you're saying?
No, not at all. So if for them to be able to implement it, they need to access it somehow. So they can access it through our flyers that we share, through our Cafe Ushahidi sessions, or through the website. But basically, what is there is that the summaries are in plain language, and they have clear directive on how this can be done. So a teacher can just read and decide to implement that particular intervention. Or if he has any challenges, particular challenges, then he can get back to eBASE, then we'll be happy to assist him. But a trained teacher on his own can go through the toolkit, read it, understand it, and implement it in this setting. Well, I guess that is clear for 9. Thank you again, 9, for those interesting questions.
Thank you. Thank you too.
So thank you. So if you don't have any question, we'll be happy to hear your comments or any recommendation for us. If none, then I think we had a very interesting session. This means that we probably explained very well. And we'll be happy to have your questions. Should you have any later, you can send them to us by email or by WhatsApp or by phone call. Any other means, we'll be happy to reply to your mail. We'll be happy to follow up and explain more to you. If there is no further question, then we may be ending 8 minutes earlier. And that will be by me thanking everybody for coming and for your time, and wishing to see you next week, same time. We'll be having yet another interesting sets of presentations and in this our webinar series geared towards mobilizing evidence from the teaching and learning toolkit. I will leave the floor to Gloria and Awe if they have any final remarks and want to say goodbye.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rigobert, for the closing remarks. Well, not actually closing remarks, because I'm still talking. Yeah, so I want to thank everyone for attending this webinar session, and I hope you learned a thing or two. And please do invite more people to attend next time. You can call a friend or a colleague at work to attend, because I'm very sure that they're going to learn a thing or two from our sessions. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Okay, I want to thank you all for joining, and I want to plead that we shall be having another webinar session same time next week. So we are pleading on you all to invite your friends, colleagues, and other peers to join and share with us in this interesting webinar. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.